As members of the Nakuru Human Rights Defenders Network, to issue a statement on very unfortunate happenstances in our country today. We are all aware of the skirmishes that are taking place in Laikipia, particularly Ol-moran area, and we note that this is not the only place where we are experiencing tensions. Only the other day we had issues around the Nakuru Narok boundaries, the Laikipia area just across here. Before then we had some issues in the borders of Ol Marakwet, West Pokot, Baringo, and we've had this perennial conflict pitting communities in Baringo, particularly Baringo Tiati, Baringo North, and Baringo South. And this coming at this time, it raises quite a number of issues that we'll be speaking to. We'll start reading the statement from the left. Irene will read some part, and then the rest of us will complete. So Irene, you can go ahead.
Press statement, Nakuru Human Rights Defenders Network, on the escalating insecurity and resultant humanitarian crisis in Ol-moran, Laikipia West, Laikipia County. We, the undersigned peace-loving citizens of Kenya, convening under the banner of the Nakuru Human Rights Defenders Network, concerned by the escalating insecurity and the ensuing humanitarian crisis in the Ol-moran area of Laikipia West sub-county in Laikipia County, disturbed that the violent attacks by alleged bandits have so far claimed the lives of 8 innocent lives, including those of 3 police officers on the duty to protect the lives and property of Kenyans, caused wanton destruction to people's and public property, including schools, brought essential services such as education and health to a standstill, and disrupted lives, thus rendering them destitute. Equally disturbed by the revelation of the Rift Valley Regional Commissioner that the skirmishes are part of a political scheme to occasion forced mass transfer of populations in the uprun of the 2022 general elections, and that the police are ill-equipped to decisively quell the attacks, noting that there has been similar, if not related, tensions and skirmishes in other parts of the country, including Nakuru, Narok border, Baringo Ol Marakwet border, and Baringo East, Baringo North, and Baringo South borders in Baringo County, aware of our distinct history of politically instigated tribal clashes, and worried that the current situation may as well be a precursor to the violence as we approach the general elections of 2022, disappointed that the government has failed to provide long-lasting solution, but has often adopted a reactionary approach which has resulted in the human rights violation in form of loss of lives, community balkanization, blanket condemnation, arrest and brutalization of innocent civilians, as the case of Baringo. Fully aware of our constitutional rights to security, protection, and the obligation of the government to observe, protect, and fulfill the Bill of Rights, especially the right to life, do hereby state as follows.
Well, that number one, the Human Rights Forum, the Nakuru Human Rights Network, has always and will continue to promote peaceful coexistence and adherence to the rule of law through strategies of civic education and advocacy. That so far the insecurity situation is reaching worrying and alarming levels. 8 lives have been lost, and among the 8 are 3 police officers on duty to protect the lives and property of Kenyans. Hundreds of persons have been displaced, and the victims are psychologically traumatized. Business has come to a standstill, including learning in schools, a factor that will contribute to the vicious cycle of conflict and poverty. That the response by government, and this is important, that the response by government has either to been underwhelming, the government has been inconsistent in its response to the frequent attacks on people in various parts of the country. His admission that the bandits are armed with more sophisticated weapons compared with the police is also cause for alarm. We all remember the regional commissioner stating on national TV that the weapons being used by the bandits are superior to those that are being used by the police. That the current insecurity situation does not sit well for the country, especially now that we are approaching a high-stake political season. That it has been linked with political mobilization is also more distressing. This has been said, and we know our history. Anytime we are approaching elections, insecurity escalates. And so we don't see this as a case of isolation. This is in keeping with the trend, where every time we are getting closer to elections, we start seeing ethnic mobilization that is politically motivated. And on the basis of that, we call upon the concerned stakeholders as follows. The first stakeholder is the President of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency the President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. We demand that the President pronounces himself on the violence and the position of government as regards the political linkage to the violence. We have seen the President declare drought a national disaster. We want him to come out. He has been silent. We want him to come out and as head of state and a symbol of unity, speak himself to this violence. Number two, we demand the President to immediately deploy adequate, well-equipped and facilitated security teams to the hotspots to quell the violence. We cannot have policemen being armed with the kind of weapons against a ragtag army that has no rules, that obeys no rules, that knows no procedure, pitting against each other. So we want the President immediately to ensure that a contingent of specialized forces is on the ground to determine what's going on. Number three, and towards the most important of our demands to the President, is that he needs to tone down his political rhetoric and involvement in the succession politics, as this is partly why political tensions are escalating in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, you know the President is more concerned about who succeeds him. It's the only time we are seeing a president, an incumbent, as concerned about his successor. And the net effect of this is more political rhetorics at the expense of essential services by government, including security.
So our call to politicians, especially those leading the presidential candidates' politics, we are calling on them to tone down political rhetoric and make it a personal responsibility for Kenyans, to mobilize Kenyans for peaceful, free and fair, creditable 2022 general elections. For our security agencies, being the implementers of and protectors of the people and their property, we ask them and we call for them to act speedily and decisively to arrest all those suspected to inciting, fueling and funding and sustaining the violence. The arrest of the two politicians yesterday, to the extent that there is evidence linking them to the violence, is a step towards the right direction and should be followed up by speedy prosecution. Nobody should be spared until normalcy is restored in Laikipia and any other part of the country that may experience tension and skirmishes. We also call on the security agencies to conduct speedy and in-depth investigation into sources of sophisticated weapons being used by the attackers in Ol-moran and take stern legal actions. Lastly, we call on the security agencies to restrain from arresting and brutalizing innocent citizens. To our citizens, especially those from the aggrieved communities, we call on them to remain calm, desist from speculations and allow time for investigations, as well as to keep vigil, cooperate with the security agencies through proactively sharing information of any suspicious activities going on in the community. We call on all community leaders to refrain from making utterances that could plunge the community into inter-ethnic, violence and instead encourage patience, tolerance, and cohesion. We also ask community leaders to desist from issuing unwarranted ultimatums that only goes to create more animosity other than solving the problem at hand. As well, we call on the leaders to initiate measures to address the immediate plight of the affected, including providing food and shelter for the displaced person, medical attention for the injured, and all the necessary support for the bereaved families. In conclusion, we as the Nakuru Human Rights Defenders, we urge every citizen to respect humanity and uphold the rule of law, even as we pursue solutions to the problem at hand. On the other hand, the government should embrace human rights-based approaches in finding sustainable solutions to the current insecurity incidences. Importantly, the government must lead from the front in addressing the root causes of the vicious circle of violence in the large Rift Valley region. Lastly, it is intrusive to note that the various actors have insinuated that there are known individuals who are behind the violent attacks. This allegation should be thoroughly investigated, and if found to be true, action should be taken in accordance to the law.
Colleagues to jump in to weigh in. Maybe we can start with Western, and then maybe Joseph. Then we can field the questions. Western, you can take the seat.
We would like the government to move very swiftly to see that they protect lives and properties from those affected areas.
We know certain parts of this country, apparently we have been having insecurity for quite a while. We know parts of Laikipia, like Ol-moran right now. We know parts of Samburu, parts of Baringo, parts of West Pokot, and parts of Turkana. Apparently, we have been having ragtag militias for quite some time, terrorizing and killing people, doing what we call the scorched earth policy of destruction for quite a while. And therefore, we want to ask ourselves fundamental questions. Are these ragtag militia so powerful and so much militarized to an extent that our National Police Service cannot address or counter these particular ragtag militias? And we are calling upon the national government to make sure that our police are well equipped to handle such insecurity issues, to handle such people we are calling the ragtag militias, apparently being told that they have sophisticated weapons than our national police. It's a shame. The other issue we need to look at, we need to map this country, and maybe special zones should be policed differently because of the complexities and the issues arising from those particular jurisdictions. And therefore, also have a special team that can handle such insecurity issues and also able to deal with the terrain.
Letu kama Human Rights Defenders tunawaambia hapa Rais wa Jamhuri ya Kenya na makamu wake ya kwamba Wakenya kwa wakati huu wanateswa na madhara ya ugonjwa wa COVID. Kwamba yale madhara ya kiuchumi tumepata, bado tuko katika shida zake. Wakenya saa hizi shida yao si ni nani ambaye atakuwa mrithi wa Uhuru Kenyatta baada ya mwaka 22. Pia vile kama Human Rights Defenders kutoka hapa Nakuru, tumeomba serikali zile jamii zote ambazo zimeweza kuadhiriwa wasaidiwe na misaada yote ambao wanahitaji, walindwe na magonjwa ya COVID pale kwa sababu kutakuwa na masambazo makubwa pale, na wale wote ambao wanahusika na haya masuala tunaomba mahakama yetu, na tunaomba pia vyombo vyote vya uchunguzi, wale wote ambao watapatikana lazima wachukuliwe hatua.